I need to know, do you think Wayne's funny? Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Alloy of Law, the first book in the Mistborn Era 2 saga. This is the fourth Mistborn book overall. You have the first three from Era 1, which are The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. And then this is Era 2, set, I think it's approximately 400 years in the future, and the events of the first trilogy are kind of the historical legends, religions, makeup of this world, which is kind of a cool, interesting plot to progress through with this series. I ended up giving this book a 4-star rating, which in general means I really liked the book. I definitely have it ranked below any of the three from the original trilogy, which I don't think is like a hot take. I think most people in general like Era 1 more than Era 2. And there are some reasons for that I think I will touch on in my dislikes for this video. But overall, I thought it was a good time, and I'm glad to be back in this world. So let's go ahead and jump into what I like and what I didn't like. And I'm going to start off kind of with what I just said, and that is just being back in this world. I didn't go straight from Era 1 into Era 2. I am currently in the process of trying to read all of the Cosmere this year, so I've just been following this list that I have. And yeah, it was just nice to be back. I didn't realize how much I had missed this world, and specifically the magic system, more than the world itself, which to me they're kind of really closely intertwined. The magic and the world are basically one thing in this series in particular. And yeah, I really missed it. I thought it was really interesting to see where the last trilogy left off and where we get to. We get to see kind of a development of society and everything. So, that is probably the strongest foot forward that this book puts. And, I could see how, as you progress on into the series, that could be a negative, where it's kind of, I don't want to say resting on its laurels, because there's obviously a story that Sanderson is trying to tell here, but that nostalgia or that like from the previous trilogy definitely plays a part into my enjoyment for this first book. And I am worried that moving forward, that won't hold up, and I'm going to just want it to be its own thing and kind of stand on its own. And so that while it's a positive, I'm worried about it going forward. So I'm going to put Wax, who is the main character of this book, in the positives. I thought he was a really interesting character, and kind of the arc that you see him go through, very limited in this story, albeit. I still thought it was interesting. He starts out as a lawman out in the rougher areas that aren't nearly as developed, and then is brought back into high life. And that's it almost falls into the grizzled veteran kind of trope that I really love. He's not quite old enough. Actually, he is older, but I don't know. He doesn't fit that trope exactly, but that's a trope that I really like, which I think kind of drew me to him as a character. And yeah, just like the lawman aspect of it. I do love like mysteries and thrillers. So this book kind of has that kind of vein in it. And so, but he's kind of the central, character for everything. And I did think that his banter back and forth with Wayne was funny enough sometimes. And that dynamic between those two were really good. Maybe I should kind of combine them as one, because I don't know. Separately, I still like Wax. Separately, I don't know if I like Wayne as much, but I do still really like them together. So that's nice. It is important to like your characters in a story. I do know in Era 1 that the main character, Vin, really wasn't my favorite character. I did like her, but there were other characters in the supporting cast that I liked more. But this story seems to be much more focused on Wax as a character than the kind of the group we got in Era 1. So far he is a positive for me. I think this will only be a positive for this one book for me, but the story felt much more self-contained and smaller than a lot of the other Sanderson works I've read. And I do my best to not compare like Mistborn to Stormlight and Stormlight to Mistborn and Mistborn Era 1. I don't want to compare it all, but it is all, slightly interconnected through the Cosmere and everything. But this story just kind of felt a little bit smaller. And while it definitely does have like larger implications, I'm sure that we're going to get, the fact that, I don't know, we could just focus and kind of deal with something that didn't seem so world-shattering was a nice change of pace. And maybe it's just where I am in my reading right now for this year. It's a change that I really enjoyed. And I think it just kind of lets Sanderson write a different kind of story than I have read from him recently. And so that is, I don't know, I can see how for some people that wouldn't work. They kind of want that big epicness, but I think it was okay to take like a step back and kind of, reestablish our footing in this world, reestablish how we feel with these characters, see some of the fallout from the previous stuff, but keep it kind of in a smaller scope. And while I do like the smaller scope stuff, my last positive is a huge spoiler for this book. I won't say exactly what it is, but at the end of this book, there's some stuff that happens that was just some of my favorite stuff. And obviously I'll be super vague. It's literally the last couple pages of the book, but it gives me hope for this this trilogy, or it's not a trilogy, there's 4 books total, but for these books going forward, I think it's a positive that some of that is going to be injected into this, so we had our nice small scope for this one book, but it's definitely it has the ability to really broaden and kind of get to that epic scale that I kind of have come to expect from Sanderson, but it still was nice to kind of pump the brakes there and get that. But yeah, the epilogue really was fantastic, and it really made me excited to jump straight into the next book. Okay, and now let's go ahead and switch over to some of the negatives, or some things that didn't work for me as well as I would have liked them to. And I think this is a really common complaint that I hear for this series, and that is some of the humor in this. And it's funny because some of it, I did catch myself chuckling. It was kind of silly, it's fun, very lighthearted, but also at the same time, it's like, really? That's the joke we're getting, or that's what's happening? So I would say it probably had like a 65% hit rate versus a 35% miss, which 35% of jokes missing it feels like a lot, especially when there's some that are like back to back to back. But yeah, there are some gags and just things that, I don't know, they have a certain charm to it that I do enjoy it, but I can definitely see how some people would want to tear their hair out, that it would just drive them absolutely crazy, and that, they just cannot stand, specifically Wayne as a character. I can definitely see how he grinds people's gears. Overall, I found him more to be kind of like a lighthearted aspect to it that I for the most part enjoyed. But yeah, there were definitely some humorous bits where I was like, okay, let's keep on going. So yeah, but overall that was kind of a negative. I don't know, it's just so hit and miss that I felt like I needed to go here instead of straight into the positives. Another kind of nitpicky negative, because I kind of also praised this book for the same thing, with it being so small in scope, but it did really feel like a prologue. And this is a shorter book, and maybe that's part of it, especially I think the first 3 of these books are the same size as The Way of Kings, but this really felt like a prologue, and it really felt like maybe this could have been cut in half and have been the first section of the next book. And I don't know exactly what the next book is like yet, but maybe could have smashed those 2 together to, flesh out the story a little bit more. Yeah, maybe part of it is because the epilogue is so good and really shows you what could happen, that the rest of the story is like, really, this is what we just spent the last 300 pages dealing with? But it's funny because I liked the story in of itself. So I'm kind of arguing with myself a little bit about whether it's a positive or negative. But yeah, it does kind of feel like a prologue to something much more epic. And maybe it's the fact that it feels like a really drawn out prologue, where if it were 30% as long and attached to the rest of the next section of the story, which I mean, you want to get the character development and a lot of stuff. I understand that, but that's just kind of how I feel. Like, we didn't get to where we needed to be really by the end of this book. Also, because the story feels like a prologue, is small in scope, I would have liked to have seen more of the world. We're really just in one city. I mean, we get to see some stuff in what they call the roughs or whatever, but we're really in one city. And granted, it is a huge city and everything, but I don't know, I kind of would have liked to have spent maybe more times in the roughs or in different sections of the city or something. I don't know, it all felt very, very self-contained with no acknowledgement of really anything outside of it. I would have liked to have known that, okay, there's this city, there's another city over here that has this many people, and this one that has this many. Is literally all of humanity just in this one place, or is it spread out? I don't know. I would have liked to have gotten a little bit more of that explored in this story. One of the first things I mentioned was how nice it was to be back in this world, and that the world and the magic system are basically one thing. I will say, I'm not sure how I feel about it, is there's not changes to the magic system, but the evolution of the magic system we kind of got in this book, I'm not sure if I love it. I mean, it's interesting, and Sanderson is so good at like blending and changing and messing around with his magic systems and exploring them to ways that, like, he's a genius. That's really what he's known for, is how great his magic systems are and everything. But I don't know how I feel about it. And I think I will like it because I think Sanderson will be able to use it in creative ways that are interwoven into the story. But it is a little jarring to just like a magic system that was so solid to be changed, and not that it breaks any of its own magic or any of its own lore or anything, but just the evolution wasn't something I was expecting. I was really expecting us to settle back into that comfort of the magic system that I had a pretty good understanding of. So that one is going to be in the negatives. Like I said, I really like this book, so none of these negatives are like big negatives. They're more nitpicks than anything. But the evolution of the magic system, I'm going to put it in the I'm questioning, not sure how I feel about it. It's a negative right now, but it could end up being something really creative and awesome. But those are my positives and negatives. Overall, I am really, really interested to see what happens in this second quadrant of Mistborn. I've heard it not as positive thoughts about it throughout, but I think because I'm coming at this from like, I'm reading all of the Cosmere, a Cosmere's perspective, and not necessarily such an individual series of books perspective, maybe I'll enjoy it more. But we'll see. I am reading, The Shadows of Self and The Bands of the Morning back to back, I think. So unless I put something else in there, but I think I'm going to read those back to back. So I should get through these pretty quick. Kind of all depends on my handy dandy list. But let me know your thoughts about the Alloy of Law, about your thoughts about Era 2 in general, if you can keep it pretty spoiler free. I would be interested to see. And do let me know if you think Wayne is funny, because I just need to know if people do or not. But that's all for me today. I hope you have a good one.